CQ. Hello, CQ. CQ, the Old Friends Net. Time for the Tuesday edition of the Old Friends Get Together. And that control for the day, W4MEC in Henderson County, North Carolina. Old Friends Net is an old-fashioned roundtable style net carried out in the Amplitude Modulation mode only. And while we're centered on vintage gear and the restoration of, anybody that can generate an AM signal is welcome to join. This net meets 3 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 a.m. and Sundays at 4 p.m. The frequency is always 3715 plus or minus vintage gear. And I'll take check-ins a couple times throughout the net, pick up stragglers. So for those wishing to participate, please give W4MEC a call and come now.
Good morning, Charlie. WA4LLR.
4LQ. KJ4B.
ARK. WB4NKL.
Okay, so far we got Dave, WA4LLR, Steve, N4LQ, George, K4GDN. I heard a weak John in there, KZ4B, with Buddy after him, WB4ARK, and then Cliff, WB4NKL. Any other check-in? I guess after Sunday, everybody wants to sleep in. One more time, here's the order. LLR, LQ, GDN, 4B, ARK, and NKL. Good morning, fellas. And we got a nice about 24 degrees here. Clear skies out there. And beautiful day. Just a little chilly. And again, so far, there's not a whole lot going on here, so I have to go a little farther in the day to say if something has happened. So, let's see, anything interesting yesterday? My daughter's car is giving her trouble again, so we're going to take care of that today. And hope it won't be too expensive or whatever. My wife just walked through the hallway and said, "Break!" But the transmission was built less than a year ago, and it has a 1-year warranty. So if something went wrong with the tranny, I guess except for putting it in or out, we should be okay. So let's get started with Dave, WA4LLR in the group, W4MEC.
All right, W4MEC and the net, WA4LLR. Good morning to everybody. We also have 24 degrees and clear skies, going up to high, they say, of 56 today, before we start another downhill on the roller coaster of temperatures. Snow Wednesday evening, and so on and so forth. So we'll see what develops. Running the Harvey Wells this morning with the SB220 and a Drake 2A. So those are the conditions that prevail. Steve, here it comes, N4LQ, WA4LLR.
All right, WA4LLR, N4LQ. Sounding good there, Harvey. Mr. Wells. Well, it's 28 degrees here. I'm running the Ranger, barefoot, about 48 watts, and the loop antenna, and got the electrical outlet that burned up replaced yesterday. I had a 20 amp outlet that I put in place of it. What burned up was a 15 amp outlet, and I had my electric heater plugged into it. Well, the breaker for that line, it's a dedicated line, it's a separate line. The breaker is a 20 amp breaker, and the wire is 12 gauge wire, so you know it should have a 20 amp outlet on it. according to code, you have to have a 20 amp outlet or bigger, or not much bigger. The one I put in is a single with a round outlet, so only one thing can be plugged in now. But the ground wire broke off where it got, I guess it melted or something, and that's where it shorted from hot to ground. And so I had to extend it with a butt connector and some piece of bare 12 gauge wire, and I got it all back together, and seems to be working pretty good. Got a nice warm shack now. So over to George, K4GDN, N4LQ.
Okay, N4LQ, K4GDN. Good morning, everybody. This morning we're running the Viking 2, putting out a little over 100 watts, receiving on a HRO5A1. And it was about 30 degrees when I came out here to the shack this morning at about 7:30. And that's interesting about the electrical outlet. I know the house that we bought here in Myrtle Beach was a custom-built house. However, they put in contractor-grade electrical switches and outlets, and I've replaced a few of them along the way, particularly the dual switches where you can turn things on and off from two locations. They use the cheap contractor-grade stuff, and I replaced all that with limited stuff, which is available at Home Depot or Lowe's. It's a little more expensive, but it certainly works a whole lot better. And Charlie, I really enjoyed your rant, I guess I'll call it, about ham radio that was on the internet. I'll have a little more to say about that the next time around. So with that, let's see, pass it on to John. KZ4B, K4GDN.
Okay, K4GDN and the group KZ4B, fine business, George. Good conditions today. Signals are strong. I hope you're hearing me okay. Somebody mentioned that I was weak, so I like feedback on that. It looks normal here as far as I can tell. But anyway, we're running the usual T150, driving the Ameritron AL82, and we're talking to RF Parts Steve, real nice guy, and he was complaining that China was giving him a hard time getting 3500Zs, that he tests everything that he gets because there are a lot of bad tubes, but when he wants to send them back and get good tubes, they demand a 100 tube order. So he's quit ordering 3500Zs from China. And I mean, you know, the mathematics there don't work. So when he's out, he's not ordering any more unless things change. So if you need any spare 3500Zs, you might move quickly. It's a real shame. A lot of this good stuff that we play with is getting harder and harder to find. So, to keep from outrunning the hourglass, over to Buddy, WB4ARK and the group KZ4B, over.
KZ4B, WB4ARK. Okay, John, that's very good information. Well, Steve, I wonder if your outlet was one of those where you just plug the wire in, strip it back a certain distance, and then plug it in a hole, or was it wrapped around the screw terminal and then tightened down? either way, if the wire wasn't tight on the screw or had become loose, then you could have a situation where you're going to burn up that terminal. The neutral wire wasn't affected. So I wonder if it was not tightened up properly, if it was wrapped around the screw, or if it was plugged in just straight in, that the contact was not sufficient to warrant maybe 12, 14 amps, whatever that heater was actually pulling. Let's see. Well, for the most part, our receptacles have done pretty well here at our location. I didn't spec any of the electrical parts that were used, although I did spec several of the connections. I wanted a 4-way circuit so I could turn on our soffit lights from either the front, the back of the house, so forth, and vice versa. Well, let's see, we're at about 28 degrees here. Clear skies, and we're running the ART-13 today, and waiting on a crystal that might function as the 3715 crystal. Gonna see what happens when I plug it in. And so with that, over to WB4NKL. This is WB4ARK.
WB4ARK, it's WB4NKL. Good morning, everybody. I'm in the basement shack on the 32V3 Collins 75A4 receiver, and I got a Heathkit SA2000A matching the antenna. This antenna's resonant on 3885, so it takes a tuner to make the transmitter happy. 21 degrees here, a little colder than Burnsville, which is unusual, but it's supposed to get up to 56 here according to the underground. So, looking forward to that. I seen the pictures of the outlet, Steve. I'm glad you got that straightened out, got the heat coming out the heater instead of the socket. I guess that could cause a fire situation there, looks like. I remember a few years back, it's been a long time back now, they were trying to use aluminum wire in some of the houses and house trailers and stuff. That was sure a mess. I can't imagine why they even thought of that. But I've always tried to use the 20 amp outlets when I replace one. And I don't like the ones that plug, just plugging the wire in. We had a few of those here in the house, and where I've plugged the heaters in, I've pulled them out and changed them because I didn't like that type of connection. Oh, send it on back to Charlie. Go ahead, Charlie. W4MEC, WB4NKL.
WB4NKL and the Old Friends Group, it's W4MEC. Any other check-ins would like to join us? Everybody's still curled up on a cold winter morning. Didn't want to get out of bed. W4MEC and the Old Friends. Oh, real good round there, fellas, and good morning to you all again. Let's see, comments. Yeah, that was a rant. That's because yesterday I found out when my daughter called me and the car was acting up again, I just really got upset. I said, not again. I tell you what, you know, she has more car trouble than any 10 people put together I know, and I think it's her, to be honest with you. And it could be just, you know, how long, I don't know what the answer is to it. It just seems I'm always dealing with it. And, you know, she's down in Mill Spring, and when you look on a map, and from my house to her house is a straight shot east. But, yeah, I go down I-26 to 74 and over to 108 and back around. It takes about 40 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes, depending on traffic to get there. And there is a road straight shot east, Holbert Cove Road, and it's got more curves in it than 3 or 4 Maryland Monroes put together. So it's kind of a rough way down on the brakes and shifting down low gear, and it's even rougher coming back up the hill. So anyway, they had a massive wreck here Saturday on I-26. This time before the Geist Bridge. They said a car cut off a tractor trailer. He lost control and went sideways and went onto the guardrail and was hung up on the guardrail, and tractor park stuck in the woods there, and it was closed. It was in the morning sometime, and it was closed till like 7 o'clock Saturday night. All the traffic was routed onto US 25, and the smart ones kept going, but the dumb ones turned on 176, and there wasn't enough red ink in Google Maps to mark how backed up the traffic was, because on 176 it's one lane about halfway to Saluda, and they got one of those automatic traffic lights that allows the traffic to go over the 200 yards of road that they've got closed. And that traffic light backed those people up to Irwin, Tennessee. I was going to say Asheville, but it was worse than that. What a royal mess, you know, and that was all afternoon long. So if anybody had GPS in their car, they said the only option was to go continue down 25 or something like that. Don't on 176. So anyway, what else we got there? Comment, aluminum wire. I remember that when copper got so expensive, and when it did the last time, it's cheap compared to what it is now. But yeah, they went to aluminum wires on trailers and houses, and and it didn't take long for a couple houses and trailers to burn down to realize that this wasn't particularly a good idea. So thankfully they went back to copper, even though they still use aluminum on a lot of entrance cables, and which is interesting because my neighbor, when I was moving her main entrance panel on the outside of her house there, required I think 4/0 from the panel but what was coming in was about a number 1 copper, and this was a 200 amp service, and I had to get the adapters for 4/0 aluminum to number 1 copper going to the transformer, and I'm going, well, how does get away with number 1 copper, and I got to come up with 4/0, but I did. So anyway, back to WA4LLR in the group W4MEC.
Okay, Charlie, fine business, W4MEC, WA4LLR. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just curious, Charlie. This deal with your daughter's car has been the running, not running gag, but the running adventure story for a long time. Has it been the same car, or is she having trouble with multiple cars? I'm just curious. Man, I'm with you. Seems like she has more car trouble than anybody I've ever seen. But well, I guess it keeps you off the streets, or on the streets, maybe. Oh man. Anyhow, and Steve, I enjoyed the picture of your burned outlet, and I noticed you had the appropriate scripture behind it. The elements will melt with fervent heat. I'm glad it didn't burn the house. Let's see, George the Viking's doing a good job, and the buddy, of course, the ART is, and the T150, John. And Cliff sounding good from his bunker. We got some carpenters supposed to be coming at 9 o'clock. Got my fingers crossed. I hope they show. But that and some jail ministry this evening is about it for today, I hope. Space weather is pretty calm. Sunspot number is 52, solar flux is 113, and the K is 2.33. A few things from this day in history. On this day in 1942, Luftwaffe test pilot Helmut Schneck was the first person to successfully use an ejector seat. His jet fighter panel iced up and he was flung out by the compressed air. Let's see, what else is going on? Let's see, on this day in 1929, 50 years after the gunfight at the OK Corral, Wyatt Earp passed away at age 80 in Los Angeles. Also on this day, Johnny Cash performed at Folsom Prison in 1968. And on this day in 1982, a plane crashed in the Potomac, killing 78 people. And this one's kind of grim. On this day in 1987, Richard Crafts, a Connecticut man, was arrested for murdering his wife and disposing of her body in a wood chipper. On this day in 1942, Henry Ford patented plastic automobile construction. And on this day in 1404, King Henry IV outlawed alchemy because he was afraid that if people learned to make gold from base metal, his reign would be in danger. So there you go. Here comes Steve, N4LQ, WA4LLR.
Okay, WA4LLR, N4LQ. There's a lot to take in. Wyatt Earp. I read about him the other day, and he had a car, and I think I saw a picture of his car. His favorite pastime was hanging out at the movie theaters. He loved to go watch the movies back in those days, and it's hard to imagine, you know, somebody from the Wild West driving a car, but I guess he was around long enough to see those invented. And let's see, the outlet that was burnt. I cracked it apart, and of course, there's Mickey Mouse ears on each end of the outlet, as you know, where the screws go, and those are part of a saddle or a yoke that goes all the way down through the middle of the outlet, and that is connected to ground, center pin, and it's got the green screw on it and all that. So what happened was the hot terminal, apparently, the best I can tell, it either melted through or arced through this very, very thin piece of plastic that separates that yoke, that metal yoke, from the screw terminals. There's just almost nothing there. It's as thin as, thinner than insulation. I was kind of shocked, as it were. Anyway, that's what happened, and it heated up everything. And well, let's see, Buddy, on that crystal, I mentioned a crystal that I'd found on eBay because Jack was looking for one, and he signed out before I had a chance to talk to him, and so I sent him an email with a link to that crystal, and he replied back, and he said, that's already been sold. So I thought, I bet you somebody on the net bought that crystal. So we'll see. I figure it's somebody on the net, and I think we just found him. Maybe it was Buddy. It looked like a pretty good deal, though, on that what is that, Bowie? Anyway, and Cliff mentioned using a tuner. Yeah, I was looking at the specs on this Ranger, and and the impedance on 40 meters and above, it can match up to 2,000 ohms with its Pi network. 2,000 ohms. That's a wide range, so you wouldn't need a tuner with it. I think it's 500 on 80 meters, but it'll go up to 2,000 on 40 and above. So, again, on the back to the shifting gears, back to the first gear, the outlet. Yeah, these were screwed on. The wires were screwed down good and tight too. They didn't use what they call the backstabber holes on the thing, and yeah, those make things easy to put on, but I don't know how good they are. A lot of people don't trust them. I've never heard of any big problem, but who knows? Anyway, back over to George. K4GDN, N4LQ.
N4LQ is the group, K4GDN. That's kind of interesting about the Ranger. I just pulled out my Ranger manual and looked at it, and it says that the final can match all bands from 50 to 500 ohms, and it goes on to mention the range of antenna impedance may be matched at frequencies above 7 megacycles, extends roughly from 25 to 2,000 ohms, which is pretty good. And the Ranger 2 I have, that's what the manual says on it. And Charlie, you're right about the condition of ham radio, and the same thing I think is true for motorcycles. I have a good friend who was a major player in the first Harley shop here in Myrtle Beach. He got out of the business in '98, and he said he didn't really want to have anything to do with the people on them anymore. He said for the most part they're overweight, underdressed, and the motorcycles, all they could do with them is make a lot of noise. And that's certainly the case now for most of the Harleys that I see here in Myrtle Beach. And for me, now owning a Harley, that's the biggest problem, is the other people and their attitude that they want to stick in your face. I really am sorry about that. And to some extent, that's what's happened with amateur radio. But it's progress, and it's happening in a lot of areas. We see that. And I want to make one comment about the aluminum conductors. Supposedly, when you go from copper to aluminum, you're supposed to use a transition element. It's a piece of metal that gradually grades from pure copper to pure aluminum. And it's very important that the aluminum be pure. Excuse me. I had a case when I was working for Michelin. We had some big several hundred horsepower chiller motors fail, and they were induction motors with aluminum conductor rotors, and the aluminum that was used in the casting of those rotors was not pure. It was below 98%, and that caused the motors to fail. And the cost of rebuilding one of those motors was somewhere in the $10,000 region. And once I analyzed the armature conductor and found it wasn't pure aluminum, the company that supplied the motors had to cough up a bunch of bucks because we had two of them fail, and they were consecutive serial number motors, and from a very well-known manufacturer. Anyway, enough on that. So we'll pass it on to John. KZ4B in the group, K4GDN.
Okay, K4GDN in the group, KZ4B here. Great conditions today. It's very nice. The band's quiet and signals are strong. Steve, the gauge of the wire going to your overheated outlet, what gauge is that? I assume it's either 12 or 14. It should be 12, but you might comment on that. I have had several outlets here to fail where they were all, the wire was underneath the screw, not plugged in the back. Plugging in the back is a good way to start a fire. It's reliably unreliable. But I had this house was built by a very good electrical contractor, but even so, the several outlets failed because they didn't tighten the screw enough, and that's not a good thing. With regard to aluminum wire, aluminum creeps, so it doesn't work well to put it under a screw, because over time it actually will squirt out and lose tension. And the reason the heavy gauge wire like number 4 is okay with aluminum is it doesn't go under a screw. It's a compression terminal that surrounds the wire, so the wire cannot squirt out. And also, you're supposed to use Noah locks, which helps, aluminum corrodes, so it mitigates the corrosion and also improves heat transfer. But so the heavy gauge wire with stranded aluminum works quite well properly installed. But under a screw, like in an outlet, or especially plugging it in the back, is just it's a good way to start a fire. And there's no difference current-wise between a 15 amp outlet and a 20 amp outlet as far as the construction goes. The difference between the outlets is the configuration of the pins, so that you can supposedly only plug in a 20 amp plug in a 20 amp outlet versus a 15 amp outlet. The difference is the gauge of the wire feeding the outlet. So number 12 is supposed to feed a 20 amp outlet, and number 14 is for a 15. It's so 12 is a 20 amp and 14 is for a 15 amp outlet. But so there. Okay, buddy, take it away. WB4ARK on the group, KZ4B, over.
KZ4B, WB4ARK. Well, let's see. That's very good on the receptacle, Steve. I guess you found the issue there. And I think you did mention that they were using number 12 wire. So they had everything right. They just the receptacle maybe overheated and failed. Let's see what else we got here. Well, we had there's a company that close to York, South Carolina, that they do a big business, and they've been using Duncan for quite some time as their backup machine shop. And but they always wait until the part has totally failed, and before calling or bringing what's left of it over to have it either re-welded or built up and then turned down and all kinds of stuff. But it seems like they would learn that taking it out of service before it completely fails might be a little bit better. But no, they don't do that. They wait till it fails completely, and then they bring it over, and of course it's totally almost toast at that point, which was an issue. Yesterday I had to weld up a brass piece, and it was just, I mean, the inner race of the bearing had totally destroyed the the brass part that it was mounted to, and it had to be built up significantly, and then it'll have to be returned down and remade. So anyhow, that's the way some of your companies operate these days. Talking about amateur radio, there's a friend of mine in Gastonia. I've mentioned his name before, but we won't mention it today. He has a friend that lives just over the line here in South Carolina, and this guy has a setup whereby he has a transmitter and antenna and all the makings of a station at the lake. And he sits in his house with display screens and operates this unit from remote. So my friend was over there the other day, and he said he was showing him how he was operating a station, and he said, "How many watts are you running?" So he looked up at the meter. He said, 750. So he said, well, which way is your antenna pointing? So he looked at the display, and it's pointing west. So that's not much of a operating system, if you ask me. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a way to go. It's kind of like talking on the telephone. So anyhow, we'll say we'll hand it over to Cliff. WB4NKL, WB4ARK.
Yeah, WB4ARK, WB4NKL. Yeah, I don't guess I'd be in ham radio if I bought a radio and plugged it in. I kind of like messing with the old stuff, keeping it going. Makes that's the hobby for me. Steve, I'll try. I seem like I tried to get this 32V to tune straight into the antenna one time, and I was having trouble keeping getting a dip. But I didn't play around with it too much before I brought the tuner down. But I might try that again. If it'll get a good dip and get the right plate current without a tuner, that would be better. I guess probably some loss in the tuner. But I'll get into that again sometime. But I don't know. You'd think Collins would match a pretty good range, but I'll have to get the book out and see what it says. I guess I'll get out of the basement and crawl upstairs, see what's going on today. Might have some workers back today. We got them back a couple of days last week to work on the house and stucco, and it's supposed to be warm enough today, so they should be able to get back at it. So go check on that. Enjoyed it. Thanks for calling it, Charlie, and we'll try to catch everybody Thursday. W4MEC, WB4NKL.
All right, Cliff, W4NKL in the group, W4MEC. Do we have any late check-ins that would like to join us? Come now. KF4DRN. Well, we got Greg woke up for us, so you've probably been awake for hours. Good morning, Greg. Go ahead and make a transmission, and you'll be after Buddy on the next go-round because Cliff just left us. You'll be after W4ARK. So go ahead and make a transmission and turn it back to me. KF4DRN, W4MEC.
W4MEC, KF4DRN. A little bit late of getting over here. I got to talking to some other guys and on the other net, after the net, I should say, and I'm on a different rig this morning, little Globe Scout 65. I only put down about 12 watts and modulating up to about, well, looks like sometimes I can get about 40 out of it on the voice speech. But that's stationed on this end, and I hope I'm on frequency good, and hope it sounds okay. I'll pass it back to you, Charlie. KF4DRN.
Okie dokie, K4DRN and the old friends W4MEC. Well, Greg, that rig sounds absolutely wonderful. And signal strength here is S9 plus because the needle is just a little bit to the right of S9. So couldn't give you a 10 over because it ain't there. So actually this meter doesn't have a 10 over. It goes from S9 to 20 over, then 40, then 60. So it's a guesstimate after S9, but you're higher than S9. Very good. Let's see, what else? Yeah, Harley-Davidson, George, if you go on the internet, Harley-Davidson is like on the verge of bankruptcy, you know, and they say this person is a reason and that person is a reason, and trying to make electric motorcycles, which was a total disaster, was a reason, you know. So they got reason after reason, but I tell you, probably if they just go back to making a super glide and an electric glide and forget all the other gewgaws and bells and whistles, maybe people would buy them again, you know. Something simple, you know, and I would say go back to points and breakers ignition instead of all the electronic controls. I mean, their motors are controlled about like a regular car motor now with the computer, and I don't know, and they have a heat issue too. They actually had to put a deflector on the rear cylinder to get the heat away from your legs, and people were complaining like crazy when they were stopped at a traffic light. Their legs would just like be on fire from the heat radiating off that motor, you know, because they punched it out from 74 cubic inches to, I don't know what it is, it's in some metric number. It used to be 1200 cc with 74 cubic inches, and now it's 16 or I don't know, 19, I don't know what they punched it out to. But it made the motor really hot, and people were complaining. And talk about a kludge device, that heat deflector was pretty kludgy. So I think they made some bad decisions there. But and people have been abandoning them to go to Indian motorcycles. So I don't know how that's working. So and the copper to aluminum, yeah, there's a special adapter there. I had to get that for my neighbor's house there, where aluminum goes in one side and copper goes in the other, and they make them in all different gauges. They had a 400, they had a 4-aught for the aluminum and a 1-aught for the copper. They had a block just like that, and that particular one you secure with 2 huge Allen screws, and because I didn't have a crimper. And they make a crimp on that does that, but this is a big aluminum block with or whatever the metal is. It's not aluminum, it's something else, and a mixture. And with holes on each end and 4 big old Allen screws to tighten the wire down. So let's see what else there. Aluminum wire, yeah. Aluminum copper is so expensive because the only way to make it is through electrolysis. Is that what you remove hair with? Electrolysis. Anyway, the one where it's all ions or whatever that travel through goo and build up on an armature, and that's the copper you got to use for electrical work, and aluminum's the same way. And if you melt down quality aluminum and to cast it again, and you can machine it and all that, but if you think you can take an aluminum can and melt that down and use that aluminum, you don't want to use the only thing that's really aluminum is the top. If you pull the tops off of those cans and you got enough of them, melt them down and cast something, that'll be pretty much okay. But if you melt the can down, that is some crap aluminum, and you don't want to cast and machine anything out of that. So anyway, let's get going again with Dave, WA4LLR, W4MEC.
All right, Charlie, W4MEC, WA4LLR. Yeah, that's kind of aluminum-coated plastic or something in those cans. It's some kind of a really flimsy material. Good morning to you again, Greg. Good to hear you again on the Globe Scout. Let's see what else. Yeah, I need to get out of here. I'm supposed to have some workers coming in about 15 minutes, but I want to share one more thing. I left out a tremendously important this day in history. On this day in 1910, Lee DeForest arranged the world's first radio broadcast to the public in New York City. He succeeded in broadcasting the voice of Enrico Caruso, along with other stars of the Metropolitan Opera, to several receiving locations in the city, where listeners with headphones could marvel at the wireless music from the air. And he had big posters put up showing a lady listening to a radio and said, "For the long winter evenings to come, let radio furnish the entertainment." So that was the first broadcast to the public that was set up to promote radio. Anyway, that's it from here. Thanks for calling it, Charlie. Got to go and see if I can find these workers. 7-3, God bless. N4LQ, WA4LLR.
All right, WA4LLR, N4LQ. Very interesting and informative. Let's see, Buddy mentioned the guy that does remote. That has gotten to be very, very popular, and the new rigs they're advertising are centered around that capability, and they have Ethernet connectivity. Yaesu, ICOM, Flex in particular, and Aircraft, they're all into it. They got an Ethernet port on the back and hook it right to the internet and shoot it out to wherever you want. Aircraft had the K3, but they had a rig called the K30, which was zero power. It was basically just the front panel, and it connected directly to an Ethernet port. Like if you were in a hotel, you could plug it into an Ethernet jack and operate your rig back home on the K30 to your K3, and it was pretty much seamless. It was just like you were actually using the rig. Some of that stuff works really, really well nowadays. As far as this thing about the impedance of these Pi networks in these transmitters, they failed to mention that 2,000 ohms or whatever it is needs to be resistive, and once it becomes reactive, like inductive or capacitive reactance, all bets are off as to whether it's going to match or not, and they don't have any provisions for tuning out the reactance of the antenna system and then matching it at the same time, so it may or may not work. And so that, I don't know if they didn't know any better, or actually back in those days, back in the 50s, very few people had any knowledge or means of measuring reactance. Of course, nowadays everybody's got an antenna analyzer, and they can all do that. Greg, KF4DRN, I want to tell you, that is the best, I think, that you've ever sounded. You're strong, and your audio is loud, and I can understand you much better than I ever have. So that's Scout 65. I think they made a 65 and an A. Am I right? They made a 65A. I'm not sure, and I think that just uses. Is that using screen modulation or Heising modulation? I'm going to have to look that thing up. That's a good transmitter. And I want to say one more thing about aluminum. Where I worked at the bank building in Louisville, it was 30 stories tall, and they built it in right before I started working there. That would have been in 75. And the whole thing has a aluminum bus bar going from bottom to top, 30 stories up. And that caused all kinds of problems. And every year they had to go in and measure the temperature. They had to shut everybody down and measure the temperature at all the connections under some kind of load, and then they had to physically tighten everything in that entire building. And that had been going on for years, and I guess they probably still do it because it was too expensive to replace it. All right, over to George out there in the beach, K4GDN, N4LQ.
N4LQ, and the old friends, K4GDN. And Charlie, a comment about the Harleys. AMF almost ruined them in the 70s until the family got back in and started running it. And one of the big improvements that was made was when they went to the Evolution engines, and basically what that amounted to was they replaced the cast iron cylinders and heads with aluminum cylinders and heads. And that cut down on all the leaks between the aluminum crankcase and the cast iron parts that bolted on top of it. And as far as sales are concerned, the Sportster really kept them alive from the mid-80s, about 86 on. The Evolution Sportster sold more than anything, and that was used to get people into the bigger bikes. But you're right, the Electra Glides and Super Glides should have been enough. The Sportster went away effectively in 2023. It hasn't really been made since then. And the Evolution, that was the end of the Evolution Sportster, which is what I've got. And it's not a bad bike. And it's interesting that talking about the ham radio and the ability of people to work on the radios and build them, the motorcycles don't even come with a toolkit anymore. It used to be if you rode a motorcycle, you had to be something of a mechanic to keep the thing on the road. I have a 2017, I think it is, Moto Guzzi, and it has the same computer control system that the small Fiats have. The Harley, though, the 98 Sportster only has an electronic ignition, and I like the electronic ignitions. They're a whole lot less trouble, and they have proven to be reliable. Everything else in it's pretty much straightforward, carbureted, and more or less normal stuff. Anyway, enough about, and the impedance matching on the Viking 2. The manual says 50 to 600 ohms. It doesn't say anything more about the higher impedance, but you're right. You get very far away from a couple of hundred ohms. You're going to have some matching going on there somehow. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to say 73. Oh, and Greg, I can copy you, but you're getting some fading in there here, but everybody else is coming in pretty well. So with that, we'll turn it over to John. And 73, and thanks for calling the net, Charlie. KZ4B and the old friends, K4GDN, 73, guys.
Okay, K4GDN and the group KZ4B, fine business, George. Well, speaking of Harleys, back several times Harley stock went from nothing to through the roof, and I had bought some Harley stock hoping to cash it out and buy a Harley. And in my career, I did a lot of overseas travel, and I could be gone for months and months and months, and God knows where. And my Harley stock had gone through the roof, and it was like $8,000, but way back then you could buy a Harley, for $8,000. And so I was getting ready to buy that Harley, and my wife didn't want me to be riding a motorcycle, so she sold my Harley stock. So when I got back home, where's my Harley stock? And so that quashed my purchase of a Harley. I never owned a Harley. My first motorcycle was an Indian Earl, which was a single cylinder that was the most unbalanced engine. It didn't roll down the street. It hopped like a rabbit, because every time the crankshaft went around, it was so unbalanced that it would literally make the motorcycle hop. Most uncomfortable. But anyway, que sera, sera. And shifting gears, one interesting thing about a Meritron, the big amplifier, the AL82, the AL1500, the 1200, the chassis and most of the parts are identical because they're all triodes, and they pre-punch the chassis for 2 tubes. If you had a 1200 or an AL1500 that only had 1 tube, there was a metal plate that blocked off 1 tube socket position, and the big external anode tube was in the other socket position. So the bottom line is that the chassis pre-punch for a pair of something, and the hole pattern matches the all the sockets that I'm aware of for a 3500Z, whether it be an IMAX socket, a Chinese socket, or the Ameritron made their own 3500Z sockets, but they all had the same 4-hole mounting pattern. So where I'm going with all this is that you cannot find, say, a 3CX 1200 A7 external anode tube. Steve can tell you about that. But you can still get 3500Zs. So you go to RF Parts and buy two 3500Z sockets, and you can resurrect an AL1200, or for that matter an AL1500. You can get AL1500 tubes. They're hard to find, but AL1200 tubes are impossible. So and RF Parts has sockets. So I bought some so I can convert my AL1500s back to AL82s. The only thing you have to do is to get a 0 to 400 milliamp meter, or in place of the 200 milliamp meter for the grid circuit, or you can just use an external shunt resistor and say ×2 and use the existing tube. Hope that makes sense. But the tube situation's getting kind of dicey. So thanks for calling the net, Charlie. Enjoyed it this morning. Hope everybody can stay warm, and hope we don't get any snow. I live in the south to avoid snow. So, buddy, take it away, and you're booming in here today. Sound great. WB4ARK in the group, KZ4B, over.
KZ4B, WB4ARK. Okay, John. Well, the thing is, I didn't mention the crystal. The crystal I need is a 1.875 megahertz or 1875 kC crystal. And I don't think that crystal probably matched that criteria. I didn't order that crystal, but I did order one yesterday, and so it's close, but it's not perfect. So we'll see what happens. Well, we'll say 73 at this point. We won't hold it, and everybody have a great part of this upcoming week. So over to KF4DRN, Greg. This is WB4ARK.
WB4ARK, KF4DRN. Okay, everybody's sounding good, and yeah, Steve, about the Globe Scout, it's just a Model 65, modulated with 6L6. I believe it's Heising modulation. Cliff would know. I mean, well, I've got the manual to it, but anyway, it's same microphone that I use with the Harvey Wells D104, and Cliff said it had real good modulation. He worked on it and resurrected this little globe the other week, and so here I am on the air with it. I haven't hooked it up yet to the AL811H yet, but I might do that at some point. I wanted to try it out, see how it done, you know, with just 12 watts. Band conditions changed around quite a bit this morning. I'll make this my last one as well, and say 7.3 all around. I was late getting in here, so I'll catch you all a later time then. I'll say 7.3. I guess back to you, Charlie. Correct me if I'm wrong. W4MEC, KF4DRN, 7.3.
Okay, KF4DRN in the group, W4MEC, real good. Well, everybody's gone except you and me, Steve. If they're listening, George, I have to disagree with you. What's the word? Extremely disagree. The only reason Harley Davidson is still here today is because of AMF. And I own one of their motorcycles, AMF Electric Glide. And when they took it over, Harley had men that had been working for Harley when Harley and Davidson still owned the company and were alive back from the 20s. And when it came to things like heat treating gears, it wasn't an automated process. These old men would break out their little black books, and they would go through the heat treatment process. And what happened was a lot of these guys either died or retired, and they started shipping transmissions with soft gears. And up until AMF took over, no Harley motor was ever started in the factory. They built the motorcycle, they put the motor in there, and they shipped it to the dealer. And he was the first one to put oil and gas in it and see if it would work. So AMF started basically an assembly line where every engine was put on a test bench and fired up before they put it in a motorcycle. So they did some good stuff to keep it going. And I don't know really what happened to them. I think they just sold it, but they kept it alive so that the Harley could buy it back from them and then continue on. But it wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. And it's interesting, Steve, when those transmitters used to say like 35 to 600 ohms, and basically that was a vertical antenna to a balanced line antenna. So either they were lying or they were designed to do that. And let's see, I guess, John, you wanted to avoid the snow, but where you are is probably not south enough if you want to make absolutely sure you avoid the snow. But it is snowed in Florida. You might have to go for Hawaii or something like that. So, and the last comment was that all V-twin motors made by the Japanese or whoever, and opposed cylinder motors, all of them, there's an offset between the cylinders from one side to the other, except for Harley, because it used a master-slave crankshaft, and it kept both cylinders in line with each other. But all the other motorcycles, like that opposed or V-twin, they offset the cylinders because they don't use that master-slave. They got a regular crank, you know. So, and BMW and Moto Guzzi are both the same way. You look down there, they're just shifted just a little bit. So, anyway, just a little bit of trivia. So there's only you and me left, Steve, so I'll just say 73 and shut down the net. And if you got any final comments, I'll be listening here. Thanks for everybody that checked in today. we'll look for you on Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. It's W4MEC shutting down the old Transnet. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Charlie. N4LQ. Good morning.
Steve, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here, John.
I was went online. I think you had made a comment about being able to get new crystal, like for $100. Somebody made the comment that for $100 you could get an FT243 crystal from Briley. Briley doesn't exist anymore. They got bought out by some other outfit that made the small crystals, either the surface mounts or HS6s, and they have not continued to produce anything that Briley produced. So I don't know of any source for new manufactured FT243 crystals. Do you, over?
No, and I think Charlie's the one that mentioned that about Briley or whatever it is. You still here, Charlie?
Yeah, and that's news to me, John, because Briley actually ran an ad, a full-page ad in QST a couple of years ago, so maybe they sold out since then, but I actually called them up and talked to them, and that's where I had that number. It was $100 for one unit, and it did drop in multiple quantities, but if you just wanted one, it was $100. But they would make an FT243, but sounds like they're belly up too now.
Yeah, I had Googled Briley, and it said that they had gotten, I don't know if they went bankrupt and somebody picked up the pieces or they got bought out and shut down, but either way, they don't exist anymore. And this outfit, I Googled the outfit that bought them, and their crystal, it's all surface mount crystals, and there's kind of like an HS6, but it's smaller, that they still produce that may have leads on it. So anyway, it got my curiosity up because it'd be nice, to be able to buy a new crystal. And I've got an SX117 that has the HS6 crystals in it, and it doesn't have all the crystals for 10 meters, and there's one other crystal position where you can down convert to the broadcast band, and so I really needed HS6 crystals, and apparently there's no source for new stuff. So life's getting tough playing with the old stuff, but that's what I enjoy. Thanks for dragging your feet. KZ4, be clear with the group.
Okay, John, make sure Steve wasn't transmitting. Well, the main thing you can do now if you're desperate is to use those RAN technology chips. They take 5 volts. You got to get them pre-programmed. The only problem with the transmitter is, especially one that when you push the key down, if you're on CW and the oscillator starts up, is that you have to have a way to turn them off when you go to receive, because they'll sit there and keep oscillating, and you'll generate a heterodyne in your receiver on CW. There is a way to get around that with diodes, but if push comes to shove, you can adapt those RAN technology chips, and they're, of course, now they're a surface mount, but they don't take a whole lot. They need 5 volts. 5 volts ground, and the output is either, there's 2 different outputs, I forget what they are. You want to use the one that's more sinusoidal, but anyway, they do work, and let's see, what else about the crystals? The other option is to find you a copy of the 1934, I believe it's December and January QST two articles about making your own crystals. And, you know, back then there weren't a lot of crystal companies. They were all mom and pop operations. But those two articles tell you how to select the quartz, how to view the quartz for cutting, how to make a saw to cut the slivers. And the next thing that's probably one of the most hard bit of information to find is it gives you the formula for how thick to cut a slice to get near your frequency. And then you got to grind it to position. But, well, I mean, this was 34. I guess Hams did that and got on the air. So if you read Steve's little ditty he sent on the email about that old timer in the 30s, I mean, that guy was lamenting the use of crystal oscillators. So the same thing I'm belly aching about was going on in 1930s there by people saying that crystals made it too easy to get on the air. So anyway, we'll see you later. KZ4B, W4MEC. Bye-bye.
73's Charlie. 73, Steve.
Yeah, see you later. You can't get those RAN technology things anymore. At Hayseed Hamfest, you had them for a while, and you go to their website, you won't find anything about RAN. I guess they ran them off. See you later, N4LQ.
I'll send you the link, not to Hayseed, but to where you get them. So W4BC.